The chamber was cold, silent, and built to break even the strongest soldiers. Its metal walls reflected the pale blue light above, and in the center stood a young human cadet, Arya Ven. Her uniform was torn at the edges from previous drills, her face streaked with dust and quiet defiance. Behind a thick glass wall, several alien instructors watched her closely. Their dark eyes glowed under the control room lights. They were tall, scaled beings, members of the Zethian race known for their strict discipline and lack of mercy. Humans talk about endurance, one of them hissed. Let's see if this one can survive without hope. The commander, a massive Zethian named General Torvek, pressed a clawed hand against the glass. His voice rumbled through the speakers inside the chamber. Cadet Arya Ven of Earth, your next test begins now. You will remain inside this isolation cell for 48 hours. No weapons, no food, no water, no communication. Arya raised her chin, her voice calm. Understood, sir. Torvek's eyes narrowed. You misunderstand, human. This isn't survival training. This is psychological collapse. You are not expected to pass. The floor vibrated as a metal gate on the far side began to rise. Arya turned slowly, her eyes narrowing at the sound. A deep growl from within the shadows. Out of the darkness stepped 3 predator cubs. They were small only in size, not danger. Each one had razor teeth, fur like molten silver, and eyes that shimmered with hunger. Their tails lashed the floor like whips. The aliens watching murmured in excitement. The Nexar cubs, born killers even young. This should end quickly. Arya took a slow breath. Her heart hammered in her chest, but her mind stayed sharp. Don't run. Don't show fear. The gate slammed shut behind the cubs. The sound echoed like a death sentence. Hours passed. The chamber lights dimmed to blood red. The cubs stalked her in circles, testing her reactions. She didn't move, didn't blink. Her eyes followed their rhythm, calculating every step. In the control room, one of the officers frowned. She's calm. That's not normal. Torvek didn't respond. He leaned closer to the screen. She's waiting. Inside the chamber, the cubs finally lunged. The first attack came from the right, a blur of claws and growls. Arya rolled aside, the air cutting past her face. The cub's claws scraped the floor with a shriek of metal. The second cub leapt toward her back, and she twisted, grabbing the beast's foreleg just before impact. She didn't fight to win. She fought to survive. Using its momentum, she shoved it aside and scrambled behind a support pillar. Her breath came fast. Sweat dripped down her neck. She could smell their hunger, raw animal, merciless. The cubs regrouped, confused. Their prey wasn't fleeing. She was studying them. Time moved differently in the chamber. Minutes felt like hours. Arya began to notice patterns, the way the smallest cub followed the leader's cues, how the second cub always attacked from the same angle. Her mind, sharp, strategic, human, started forming a plan. She crouched low and made a quiet growling sound, deep in her throat. The cubs froze. The sound wasn't perfect, but it was close to theirs. The leader tilted its head. Arya did it again, slower this time, keeping her body still, her eyes locked with theirs. The youngest cub took a step closer. Its ears twitched. In the observation deck, murmurs broke out. Is she trying to communicate? Torvek's claws scraped the desk. Impossible. They respond only to dominance, not imitation. Hours bled into night. Arya sat against the wall, her knees drawn up, eyes half open but alert. The cubs lay a few meters away, still watching her, but no longer growling. They were hungry, like her. She reached slowly toward her boot, pulling out a broken strap. Thin, flexible, almost useless. She tore it into smaller pieces and began scratching shapes into the dust, circles, lines, tracks. Her mind drifted back to her home on Earth, her father teaching her how to track movement in the woods, how to read animal behavior. Animals don't hate, Arya, he'd said once. They just survive. The sound of claws tapping the floor brought her back. The smallest cub had approached. It sniffed the strap in her hand, growled low. Arya didn't move. She let it sniff. She whispered, "You're just scared, aren't you?" The cub's growl faded into a curious sound. Then, as if unsure, it sat beside her. From behind the glass, silence. One officer turned to the commander. "General, she's not fighting them, she's teaching them." Torvek's voice was sharp. "No, she's manipulating them. Break the silence protocol. Play the distress signal." The room filled with a low, rhythmic alarm, the sound designed to stress both human and beast. The cubs hissed and backed away. Arya clenched her jaw, covering her ears. Her heart thundered. Her instinct screamed to run, but she stayed. She crawled toward the nearest cub and began making the growling sound again, slow and steady, in time with the alarm. It worked. The cubs focused on her voice instead of the sound. Torvek watched, his jaw tightening. She's adapting faster than projected. By the 12th hour, Arya's lips were cracked. Hunger burned in her stomach. The cubs grew weaker, snapping at each other. The leader bit the smallest one's shoulder, drawing blood. The young cub cried out and limped away. Arya's eyes hardened. "No," she whispered, crawling toward it. "Not like this." She found a piece of metal near the corner of the chamber, a broken vent plate. Using its edge, she cut a strip from her own sleeve and pressed it gently against the cub's wound. The creature flinched but didn't bite. It stared at her with those strange golden eyes, almost confused. Arya smiled weakly. "We survived together, okay?" In the control room, Torvek slammed his fist. "End this. She's disrupting behavioral patterns." But another voice, softer and older, stopped him. "She's doing something none of us expected," said Admiral Karras, a veteran strategist. "She's turning fear into cooperation. Let's see where it leads." By the 16th hour, the tension had changed. The cubs no longer stalked her. They watched her, mimicking her slow breathing. When she shifted positions, they shifted too. She began whispering simple words: stay, easy, quiet. The cubs didn't understand the language, but they followed the rhythm, the tone, the calmness. Her isolation wasn't breaking her. It was forging her. At one point, she stood, stretching her sore muscles. The leader cub growled softly, a warning sound. Arya met its eyes and growled back, not in anger, but challenge. For a long moment they stared at each other. Then the cub lowered its head. Submission. The watching officers murmured in disbelief. Did it just bow to her? Torvek's tail lashed in frustration. It's impossible. These creatures respect no one but their own kind. Karras only smiled faintly. Perhaps she has become one of them. Night fell again. The lights dimmed and Arya huddled in a corner, exhausted. The cubs lay close by, their breathing heavy but peaceful. She could feel their warmth against her side, their steady rhythm like living engines beside her heart. In that strange stillness, surrounded by alien predators, Arya found something unexpected: comfort. Her body trembled from fatigue, but her mind stayed alert. Every time one cub stirred, she murmured softly, her tone guiding them back to calm. By the end of the second night, they no longer saw her as prey. She was something else now: leader, teacher, pack. At dawn, a blinding white light filled the chamber. The test was over. Arya shielded her eyes as the main door slid open. Cold air rushed in and she heard the echo of boots. Alien guards entering cautiously. The cubs snarled, forming a half circle around her. Their fur bristled, their teeth bared. One guard froze. "General, they're protecting her." Torvek's voice came over the intercom, low and dangerous. "Stand down, human. Your test is complete." Arya rose slowly, her voice calm but sharp. "No, General. It's not complete." Torvek frowned. "Explain." Arya looked at the cubs, these creatures that were supposed to destroy her. She smiled faintly. "You wanted to see what breaks a human, but you forgot what makes one strong." Her eyes hardened. "We don't conquer by fear. We survive by understanding." The chamber fell silent. The cubs stood beside her like soldiers, waiting for her next command. From the observation deck, Admiral Karras turned toward the commander. "Do you see it now, Torvek?" he said quietly. "You tried to test her instincts, but you awakened her humanity." Torvek's eyes narrowed. "And that, Admiral, makes her dangerous." The chamber smelled of metal, dust, and quiet death. It had been a full day since Arya Ven last saw light from the outside world. The only sounds were the soft growls of the cubs and the faint hum of hidden cameras watching every move she made. The alien instructors thought she would be broken by now, starving, terrified, ready to beg for release. But what they saw instead was something none of them had expected. Arya was teaching. The smallest cub sat in front of her, its silver fur dirty and its stomach growling softly. Arya crouched beside it, her voice low and calm. "You have to wait," she said gently. "If you rush, you lose." The cub tilted its head, confused by her tone but responding to the rhythm of her words. The leader cub, larger and more aggressive, growled from across the room, tail swishing in irritation. Arya turned toward it and made that same deep sound she had practiced, half growl, half breath. It froze. Then it looked away. In the observation deck, the alien officers were whispering in disbelief. "She's establishing dominance," one said. "No," another corrected softly. "She's building trust." General Torvek's yellow eyes flickered with annoyance. He had expected fear, not patience. "Increase environmental stress. Reduce oxygen by 5%, he ordered. "Let's see if she stays calm when she can barely breathe." The lights dimmed again. The air grew thin. Arya's chest ached as she breathed, but she didn't panic. She looked at the cubs, restless, whining, hungry, and she knew panic would kill them all. She knelt on the floor and began scratching lines into the dust, circles and arrows. The cubs watched curiously. Arya smiled weakly, whispering, "This is the hunt. You move here," she said, pointing to a small circle. "And you here." They didn't understand the words, but they followed her finger, fascinated by the sound of her voice. To them, her calmness meant safety. The leader cub licked its paw and rested beside her leg. Arya almost laughed. "So that's your approval, huh?" Hours crawled by. The hunger in her belly had turned sharp and hollow, but she ignored it. She could feel her body growing weak, but her mind was alive, focusing, adapting. She began to observe the chamber again, searching for anything she could use. At the far end, a ventilation shaft hummed quietly. Tiny dust motes floated from it, enough to tell her air still passed through. And air meant movement. Movement meant prey. A memory surfaced. Her father back on Earth, kneeling beside a snare trap. "Survival is about rhythm," he'd said. "The world breathes. You just have to breathe with it." Arya stood, wobbling slightly, and walked toward the vent. She pressed her ear against the cool metal. Inside, she heard a faint whirring sound. Small maintenance drones cleaning the ducts. Food for the cubs. Hope for her. Using a broken piece of wiring and the metal strap she'd found earlier, she built a crude trap. Simple tension, pressure release, and timing. The cubs watched her work, their eyes glinting in the red light. The smallest one pawed curiously at the wire, almost playful. Arya smiled. "You're smarter than they think, aren't you?" When the drone finally buzzed out of the vent, it was small, barely the size of her hand, but its metal casing gleamed. It zipped low across the floor. The leader cub growled, ready to pounce. Arya raised a hand. "Wait." She crouched low, whispering, "Watch me." She triggered the trap with her foot. The wire snapped upward, catching the drone mid-flight. It fell to the floor, twitching, sparks flying. The cubs jumped back in shock, then stared. Arya knelt beside it, prying it open. Inside were small energy cells and synthetic lubricant. Barely food, but close enough to burn and warm. She tossed the damaged parts toward the cubs. "Your first meal," she said softly. "Learn to hunt what you're given." The cubs tore into the scraps with wild hunger, ripping wires and snapping metal. It wasn't real meat, but it satisfied the instinct. And in that strange metallic feast, a new bond was born. In the control room, Admiral Karras leaned forward, his eyes narrow with thought. "She's teaching them to adapt to new prey. That's impossible." Torvek's jaw tightened. "She's corrupting their instincts." "No," Karras said quietly. "She's enhancing them." Time blurred again. Arya lost count of the hours. Her muscles ached, her lips cracked. But every time she felt her strength fade, she looked at the cubs, 3 pairs of glowing eyes watching her, waiting for her next move, and she forced herself to keep going. The leader cub, once hostile, now sat near her feet like a silent guardian. The smallest one rested against her thigh when she slept. Even the middle one, fierce and unpredictable, had stopped baring its teeth at her. In the half-darkness, she whispered, "You're not my enemies anymore. You're my team." Meanwhile, in the command deck, the aliens argued. "She's becoming one of them," said a technician. Torvek snarled. "She's still human. Eventually, hunger will tear her mind apart. And when it does, those cubs will finish her." Karras shook his head. "You underestimate human endurance, General. They break the rules of survival. By feeling." By the 30th hour, a faint tremor shook the chamber. The ceiling vents hissed. Arya opened her eyes and saw new shapes drop from above. 3 small mechanical spheres rolling across the floor. They blinked with red light. Then they exploded, sending clouds of sharp metallic fragments scattering like rain. The cubs shrieked, diving behind her. Arya shielded them with her arms, taking the brunt of the shards on her uniform. Pain tore through her shoulder. She screamed once, but didn't stop. When the dust cleared, she pushed herself up, bleeding but steady. The cubs whimpered, their tails tucked between their legs. Arya knelt down, voice shaking but firm. "It's okay. You're safe, look at me. You're safe." Her tone cut through their fear. Slowly, the smallest cub crawled back toward her. Then the others followed. She pressed her hand against the floor, leaving a faint mark of blood. "Remember this," she whispered. "Fear doesn't win unless you let it." From the control room, Admiral Karras muttered, "Remarkable." Torvek crossed his arms, his tone bitter. "She's only delaying the inevitable." Karras looked at him calmly. "Or she's redefining it." As hours passed, Arya began training the cubs in small, almost playful ways. She'd throw pieces of metal across the room and watch how fast they reacted. She'd make soft clicking sounds and see which direction they followed. They learned quickly, too quickly. It wasn't just instinct now. It was intelligence. One time, when she pretended to sleep, the middle cub nudged the small one away from a sharp piece of debris. They were protecting each other. Arya watched silently, a faint smile on her cracked lips. "You're learning faster than me," she whispered. That night, the hunger grew unbearable. She sat in the corner, clutching her stomach, her head spinning. The cubs lay beside her, restless. They were hungry too. For a moment, her mind drifted, images of food, warmth, earth. But then she looked at them again, 3 alien predators who should have killed her by now, and she found strength in that thought. She reached for the broken drone pieces again, scraped the last bits of lubricant into her hand and offered it to the smallest cub. It licked the metal clean, making a low chirping sound. Then, surprisingly, it pushed the empty part back toward her. Arya blinked. "You're sharing?" She laughed, a weak, tired laugh that echoed in the cold chamber. "Guess we're not so different after all." As the 39th hour approached, something shifted. The cubs no longer looked at her as prey or teacher. They looked at her as leader. When she stood, they followed. When she growled, they answered. When she looked toward the vent, they watched for movement too. It was silent cooperation, a pack formed by survival, trust, and hunger. In the control room, Karras watched in awe. "She's turned them into a hunting unit," he whispered. Torvek's claws dug into the console. "Enough, prepare the final phase. If she will not break, we'll make her fight." Back inside the chamber, the lights flickered. The sound of heavy gears rumbled through the walls. The cubs stood alert, fur rising. Arya's instincts screamed at her it wasn't over. The main door on the far side began to rise, releasing a gust of freezing air. Through the widening gap, something huge moved, metal feet scraping, red optics glowing. A synthetic beast drone, nearly 3 meters tall, stepped forward. Its body shimmered with armor plates. Its jaw was a blade. Arya's pulse raced, but her eyes stayed cold and steady. She whispered, "Stay behind me." The cubs obeyed. From the intercom, Torvek's voice thundered through the chamber. "Let's see how well your pack survives the hunt." Arya straightened, her bloodied hands forming fists. Her body trembled, but her voice was calm, commanding. "Then let's hunt." The cubs growled beside her, tails whipping, muscles tensing. 3 young predators and 1 human, ready to face the impossible together. As the beast lunged, the chamber erupted in chaos. And for the first time, the aliens watching realized they hadn't trapped a human with predators. They had trapped predators with a human. The chamber shook with the sound of metal claws scraping steel. Sparks burst from the walls as the synthetic beast drone stepped forward, its glowing red eyes locking on Arya and the 3 cubs. It was twice her height, part machine, part nightmare. Each movement sounded like thunder. Arya stood still, her chest rising and falling in slow rhythm. Behind her, the cubs growled low, their fur bristling, but their tails didn't tremble. They had learned to follow her calm. They had learned to trust her. From the control room above, the alien instructors watched in grim silence. General Torvek's voice broke through the tension. "Begin phase 3. Predator versus prey. Let's see how long she lasts." The lights dimmed to blood red. The ground vibrated. The beast roared, a mechanical scream that echoed through every corner of the chamber. But Arya didn't move. She whispered softly to the cubs, her voice steady as a heartbeat. "Stay low. Wait for my mark." The beast charged, claws tearing deep into the floor. Arya dove aside, rolling behind a metal pillar as sparks rained down. The cubs scattered, One to the left, two to the right, exactly as she had taught them during their mock hunts. The creature's sensors flickered, momentarily confused by multiple moving targets. Arya used that split second to think. The drone was fast, powerful, but predictable. It hunted movement. It couldn't think. That was her advantage. She peeked from behind the pillar. "Now," she whispered. The leader cub darted forward, growling loudly, drawing the beast's attention. The mechanical creature lunged, jaws snapping shut with a deafening clang. At that same moment, the smaller cub sprinted along the side, sliding under a pipe, claws clanging as it leapt onto the beast's back. The aliens watching couldn't believe what they were seeing. One whispered, "They're coordinating?" Karis smiled faintly. "No, they're following her lead." Arya sprinted toward the far wall where broken debris from the earlier explosion lay scattered. Her shoulder burned with pain, but she ignored it. She grabbed a broken metal rod about as long as her arm, sharp enough to pierce a weak point. Behind her, the beast slammed its tail down, narrowly missing one of the cubs. The shockwave threw Arya off her feet, sending her crashing against the wall. Her vision blurred. She tasted blood. She forced herself to stand. The cubs were yelping, now cornered near the pillar. The beast's red optics flared brighter, charging for another strike. "No!" she shouted. Her voice echoed through the chamber, sharp and commanding. The cubs froze, not in fear but discipline. Arya's blood-streaked face turned toward them, eyes blazing. "Fall back! Left flank!" The cubs moved instantly, trusting her completely. The beast's strike missed, slamming into the floor instead. Arya used the opening to leap onto its back, grabbing onto exposed wiring with her good hand. Sparks bit into her skin. The smell of burnt metal filled the air. In the control deck, chaos broke out. "General, she's on top of it." Torvik's jaw tightened. "Impossible. It will kill her in seconds." But Karis leaned forward, his voice soft. "Watch." Arya drove the metal rod deep into the drone's joint where armor met the rotating hinge. The creature screeched. Mechanical fluid sprang as sparks flew. It twisted violently, throwing her across the floor. She landed hard. Her breath knocked out, ribs screaming with pain. The cubs roared, surrounding her protectively. They growled in unison, their formation perfect. One covered her front. The other two circled the beast. Arya coughed, barely able to breathe. "Don't stop," she whispered. "You know what to do." The leader cub growled and lunged. It bit down on the damaged joint, tearing wires free. The second cub leapt onto the creature's side, slashing at its sensors. The smallest darted under its legs, scratching at its base, looking for another weak spot. Together they moved with the precision of a trained unit. No fear, no hesitation. The beast staggered, sparks flying from its torn limbs, but it wasn't done yet. Its optics flared one last time, and a blinding beam of plasma erupted from its chest. Arya's instincts screamed. She threw herself between the beam and the cubs, grabbing a piece of metal plating from the floor. The blast hit, sending her flying backward again. The metal plate melted in her hands. Pain exploded across her arm. The cubs howled, an awful, desperate sound. Arya struggled to stand. Her voice was hoarse but still steady. "Not yet. We're not done." The beast limped now, its system failing, but it still turned toward her. It was programmed to finish the mission, to eliminate the target. Arya staggered forward, dragging the sharp metal rod she dropped earlier. Her boots left streaks of blood behind her. She faced the monster directly, her voice calm and cold. "Come on then," she whispered. "Let's see who's the real predator." The cubs circled wide, just like she had trained them. The smallest cub growled once, her signal. The beast charged, lowering its head to strike. Arya waited until the last possible second, then dropped flat on her stomach. The creature's head swung forward right over her, exposing the glowing power core under its chest. "Now," she screamed. The leader cub leapt onto the beast's back and drove its claws into the exposed section. The other two jumped together, striking from the sides. Arya used her last strength to thrust the rod upward into the core. A burst of blue light exploded across the chamber. The beast convulsed, roaring like thunder. Then it fell silent. Its body collapsed, smoking, the lights in its eyes fading out. For a long moment, there was only silence. Arya knelt on the floor, gasping for breath. The cubs surrounded her, whimpering softly, brushing their heads against her arms as if checking she was still alive. From above, no one in the control room spoke. Even General Torvik stood frozen, his claws twitching slightly. Admiral Karis exhaled slowly. She did it, he said. By command, by instinct, and by heart. Torvik's voice was low, almost a growl. She led them, she commanded predators. That shouldn't be possible. Karis looked at him. You see, General? You thought fear would break her. Instead, she turned it into strength. The door to the chamber hissed open. Cold air rushed in. Guards stepped inside cautiously, weapons drawn. But none of them moved when they saw the sight before them. Arya stood, bloodied, exhausted, but unbroken. Around her, the 3 cubs stood in formation, silent and alert, their glowing eyes watching every move the guards made. One of the guards took a single step forward. The leader cub growled, a low, dangerous warning. Arya placed a hand gently on its head. Easy, she whispered. Then she looked up toward the glass observation deck. Her voice was calm but carried through the silence. You said this was a test of survival. It wasn't. It was a lesson. You wanted to see what humans fear. But you never asked what we learned from fear. Torvik said nothing. Karis watched her with quiet awe. Arya continued, her tone steady, almost soft. You trained me to survive alone. I taught them to survive together. That's what makes us human. We adapt, we connect, even with monsters. The cubs pressed closer to her side as she spoke, as if understanding every word. Torvik slammed his fist against the control table, cracking the surface. End this. Remove them all, now. But Karis stepped forward. No, General. This is evolution, not of the cubs. Of her. The guards hesitated as Arya and the cubs walked toward the open door. The leader cub's eyes glowed brighter, scanning every movement. When one guard raised his weapon, the cub bared its teeth and roared. Arya didn't stop walking. Stand down, she ordered softly. And remarkably, the cubs obeyed. She stepped through the doorway into the light for the first time in 2 days. The corridor beyond was wide and bright, filled with alien soldiers frozen in disbelief. The cubs followed her calmly, one on each side, tails flicking in rhythm. As she passed the command deck window, she glanced up. Torvik met her gaze through the glass, his expression torn between fury and fear. Arya smiled faintly. Next time, she said softly, try harder. Outside the chamber, Karis stood waiting. He looked at her, then at the cubs, and for the first time in his long alien life, he bowed his head. You didn't just survive, Cadet, he said quietly. You changed the rules. Arya's reply was simple. Then it was worth it. She looked down at the cubs, once predators, now protectors, and smiled. Together, they walked through the metallic corridor, leaving behind the shattered test chamber and the stunned faces of those who thought humanity could be broken. Because in the end, they had learned the truth. Humans don't break. They lead,